All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Stuart Miller. I'm the session lead for Risk Modeling Beyond Insurance. So what I'd like to do is take the next, 4 minutes and 45 seconds and talk about what the session's going to be, give you a little preview of what's going to happen tomorrow. What I'd like to start off with is talking about the focus of the session, which is really taking the concept of risk modeling, which is used primarily by the private sector, mostly by insurers, reinsurers, capital markets investors, to manage risk, and really looking at how the government manages risk. So what is risk modeling in 15 seconds? Well, it's the integration of a catalog of events, the intensity of those events, the exposure that's at play, and any type of policy conditions when you're dealing about a financial loss. What we're going to be talking about tomorrow is how these models integrate science, data, statistics, and loss estimation to provide an output that's useful, which has traditionally been useful for the private sector, but we're looking at ways in which this is currently being used for the public sector. Namely, how do we take the outputs that they generate, such as distribution of potential impacts from catastrophes, how do we use the credibility they empower users with large sample sizes, and how can we take those concepts and how can the state leverage them to both identify its catastrophe exposure and, once identified, use those tools for risk transfer. So really moving beyond insurance, when we talk about the state's catastrophe exposure, what we're talking about is economic and social. Economic, obviously, infrastructure, lost revenue, cost to repair and replace damaged assets, social, death, disruption, societal risk. We're going to be looking at ways that we can follow the trajectory that modeling has been used by the private sector. Is that necessarily a wise trajectory for the public sector, for the state to follow? If so, why? If not, why not? And frankly, why are we having, why is the session important? Well, I think we're all aware of the issue, which is reducing the impact of disasters. What is the process? That's why we're using modeling. And what is the outcome of reducing loss, improving mitigation adaptation measures to reduce loss, both economic and socially, and minimize the exposure of the state? We'll be talking about applications of modeling for the state. And the people doing this are, we've got 6 great panelists for you. I won't be talking very much. I'm going to let them do all the heavy lifting tomorrow. We've got a diverse group of experts, and I'll just kind of let the names scroll behind me in the background. But we've really assembled a broad group of people with experience, both from the international perspective, whether it's from development organizations like the World Bank, like the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as the private sector like Swiss Re. And we've got a really interesting group of panelists from developing countries, both from Costa Rica and Mexico. And we'll also be hearing about case study evidence from countries like the Netherlands and from Peru, to see how these concepts are currently being applied out there by policymakers in these different regions of the world. And what can we learn from this, all this dialogue? What advances can be made? And really, we look at this as an opportunity to exchange knowledge, to promote what's been done, and to seek feedback and ways that risk modeling can be improved and enhanced by all the stakeholders that are going to be present here for the session. And I guess just to wrap up, and hopefully I'm not the first presenter to finish before his presentation finishes. But I guess I'm doing my part to get everybody to the cocktail hour sooner. I'd just like to really emphasize that we view this session as not so much a presentation, but a conversation. We really encourage you to come, use your questions and your feedback to mold the session into what you want it to be, and get the feedback that you feel is important. If you're participating online, I've also been told that there'll be a Twitter page where you can tweet your questions, and we will filter those out to the different panelists to get their responses. Just to give you a sense of the topics that they're going to be talking about, these are scrolling behind me as well. But we're going to be looking at issues of regulation. To what degree do standards, just to name one, to what degree do standards come into play? Interesting case is going to be discussed about the European Flood Risk Directive. What value is there in applying standards to catastrophe risk modeling and the use of risk modeling by the state? I hope I've done a good enough job to pique your interest. If you have any questions, feel free to find me after. Thank you.